I was 27 years old when I first met him. It was an arranged marriage, something I never really imagined for myself. I had always pictured a love story with romance, sparks, and destiny. But when the reality of my situation settled in, I understood that life doesn't always go according to the dreams we have. Still, I kept an open mind because what choice did I have? It was the path my family had chosen for me, and I couldn't fight against that. Our first meeting felt like any other arranged marriage meeting, polite, formal, and somewhat awkward. We exchanged small talk, talked about our families, and tried to gauge each other's personalities through this strange setup. But then he opened up to me in a way I wasn't expecting. He told me about his past, and for some reason his story stayed with me. He explained how he had been in a serious relationship before me, with a girl he loved deeply. They had shared so many beautiful moments, and he believed they were meant to be together. But life had other plans for them. According to him, his ex-girlfriend had been forced into an arranged marriage by her family. Her parents had made it clear that their relationship wasn't going to be accepted, and under pressure from her family, she chose to marry someone else. I could see the pain in his eyes as he spoke about her. It wasn't just the sadness of a breakup, it was the lingering ache of a love that never got a fair chance. He explained how they had been forced to part ways, but it wasn't just the breakup that left a mark on him, it was the way she chose to go along with what her family wanted instead of following her heart. I listened to his story and I felt for him. I didn't judge him for having a past. After all, we all have one. I had my own set of experiences, my own history. I wasn't expecting to meet someone who was perfect in every way. Everyone has baggage, and I understood that. His past wasn't a deal breaker for me. I didn't hold it against him. What mattered was the person sitting across from me now, and the person I could see myself building a life with. Over the next several months, we continued to get to know each other. We talked about our hopes, dreams, and expectations for the future. There was something about him that made me feel safe. He seemed kind, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in building a life together. There were no major red flags at first, just two people learning to trust one another in this journey that had been set out for us. He made promises to me, promises that he would always be there for me, that we would build a strong foundation together, and that he would never make me feel alone. I believed him because at that moment, everything seemed so perfect. The excitement of getting married started to grow. It felt like a new chapter was about to begin, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Our families were happy, and that made everything feel even more real. The thought of starting a life with him, sharing a home, building a family, it all seemed like the perfect future. I felt blessed to have found someone I could see myself growing old with. Sure, there were some doubts in the back of my mind, but they were normal, right? I mean, who doesn't question themselves before making such a big commitment? 8 months after our first meeting, we were married. The wedding was everything I had imagined, beautiful, full of love, and surrounded by family and friends. We exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other no matter what. I was excited, but there was also this feeling of uncertainty deep down. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different after the wedding. Maybe it was the adjustment to living together, the changes in our routines, or the pressure of trying to make everything work. But no matter what it was, I couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was missing. The first few weeks of marriage were blissful. We spent our days getting to know each other even more, learning each other's habits, likes, dislikes, and quirks. I was happy, and for a while I thought everything was as it should be. But as time went on, I started to notice small shifts in his behavior. The warmth that once seemed so natural began to fade. The affection I had felt before marriage seemed to be slipping away. He was still kind, but there was a distance I couldn't quite place. At first, I convinced myself that it was just the stress of adjusting to married life. Maybe it was normal to feel this way after getting married, I thought. Maybe it would pass. But the more I thought about it, the more it started to bother me. I didn't feel the same love and respect I had felt before. I tried to talk to him about it, but each time I brought it up, he would just shrug it off. "You're thinking too much," he would say. "Everything is fine." But was it? I didn't feel fine. I didn't feel the way I had when we first met, when we first got to know each other. It was as if the connection we shared was slowly slipping away, and I didn't know how to hold on to it. Loneliness started to creep in, and it was unlike anything I had experienced before. I had never felt so isolated in my life, especially not in a marriage. I found myself sitting in silence for hours, wondering what had gone wrong. I was supposed to be happy, wasn't I? I had a husband who, on the surface, seemed perfect, kind, responsible, and caring, but the affection I had craved wasn't there. The emotional connection that once seemed so strong was now a shadow. I started questioning everything. Was it me? Had I changed? Or was it him? Every day felt like a waiting game. I was waiting for him to come home, waiting for him to acknowledge me, waiting for him to give me the love and attention I so desperately needed. But it never came. The quiet loneliness followed me around like a shadow, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. At night, as I lay next to him, I couldn't help but wonder if he even saw me anymore. I had given him my heart, my trust, my everything, but what was he giving me in return? I wasn't sure where we were headed anymore, and the uncertainty only made things worse. I loved him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The more I tried to talk to him, the more he dismissed my concerns. "You think too much," he would say, but I couldn't stop thinking. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. After we got married, things weren't what I had expected. The first few weeks felt like a whirlwind, filled with excitement and new beginnings. It was easy to fall into the routine of married life, and I was determined to make it work. I wanted to believe that everything would fall into place. But as the days went on, I began to notice changes in him, changes that made me feel uneasy. At first, I couldn't quite put my finger on what was happening. The shift was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It started with the little things. He wasn't as affectionate as he had been before marriage. We didn't spend as much time together, and the moments we did share felt distant, as if something was separating us. When we would talk, he seemed distracted, like his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't as engaged in our conversations, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was losing interest in me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe it was just the stress of adjusting to married life, that maybe things would get better with time. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The loneliness I felt grew with each passing day. I found myself longing for the connection we once shared, the closeness we had before marriage. I missed the way we used to talk for hours, how we would laugh together, how we shared our hopes and dreams. It felt like that intimacy had disappeared, replaced by silence and distance. I tried to fill the void by being more affectionate, by reaching out to him, but it didn't seem to make a difference. No matter what I did, it felt like I was just one step away from him, always on the outside looking in. I couldn't understand why this was happening. We had been so close before we got married, and now it felt like he was pulling away. Was it something I had done? Had I changed in some way? I spent so many nights lying awake, wondering what was wrong. I tried to talk to him about it, but every time I did, he would brush me off. "You think too much," he would say. "Everything is fine, you're just overthinking." But it didn't feel fine. It didn't feel right. I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't being honest with me, that there was something more going on beneath the surface. I started to question myself more and more. Was I being too sensitive? Was I expecting too much from him? Maybe I was just overreacting to the normal adjustments that come with marriage. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't ignore the fact that I was feeling so lonely, that I was yearning for a connection that seemed to be slipping away. I started to wonder if he was feeling the same way, or if he had already moved on without me even realizing it. It didn't help that he seemed to withdraw even more as time went on. When we would spend time together, he would often be distracted by his phone or his own thoughts, as if he wasn't really present with me. I tried to initiate conversations, but they always felt forced, like he was just going through the motions. The warmth that had once been there, the tenderness we shared, was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was this coldness, this sense of distance that I couldn't bridge no matter how hard I tried. I began to feel like I was invisible. I wasn't sure if it was because he was too busy with his own life or if he had lost interest in me altogether. I began to question everything. Was this how it was supposed to be? Was I asking for too much? Or was I just not enough for him anymore? I couldn't find the answers, and it only made me feel more isolated. It wasn't just about the lack of affection, it was about the emotional distance between us, the fact that he didn't seem to care about how I was feeling. He didn't seem to notice that I was struggling, that I was yearning for his love and attention. I began to wonder if I was the only one putting in the effort, if I was the only one who cared about the state of our relationship. As the days went by, the sense of loneliness intensified. I found myself longing for the days before marriage, when everything felt simpler and more genuine. I missed the way we used to talk, the way we used to connect on a deeper level. Now it felt like we were two strangers living under the same roof, going through the motions without any real connection. I tried to find comfort in our shared responsibilities, taking care of the house, our daily routines, but even those moments felt hollow. I was doing everything I could to make things work, but it didn't feel like he was doing the same. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to fix the distance between us, or if it was even possible to fix. The more I tried to talk to him, the more he shut me out. He would get defensive, telling me that I was imagining things, that everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for a while now. I was starting to feel like I was fighting a battle that I couldn't win, like no matter how much I tried to reach him, he was already too far gone. The pain of feeling ignored, of feeling like I wasn't enough, was becoming unbearable. I started to retreat into myself. I stopped trying to initiate conversations or make efforts to get closer to him. It felt like nothing I did mattered, like I was banging my head against a wall. So I began to focus on other things: work, hobbies, anything to distract myself from the aching loneliness that consumed me. But even with distractions, the emptiness didn't go away. It was always there, lurking in the background, a constant reminder that something was missing. The frustration began to build up inside of me. I wanted to scream, to shake him and ask him why things had changed. I wanted to know what had happened to the man I had married, the man who had promised to always be there for me. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Every time I tried to bring up the subject, I was met with his dismissal. "Stop overthinking," he would say. "There's nothing wrong." But I knew better. I knew better. I knew that something was wrong, even if he refused to acknowledge it. It was a constant cycle. I would hope that things would improve, that things would go back to how they used to be, but every time I tried, I was met with the same coldness. And every day that passed, I felt more and more alone, trapped in a marriage that seemed to be falling apart, with no way to fix it. I was starting to question if I was the problem, if I was expecting too much from him. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I just wanted to feel loved again, to feel like I mattered. But no matter what I did, I couldn't find the connection I was so desperately searching for. After months of feeling neglected and uncertain, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but the loneliness I felt was becoming unbearable. The disconnect between us had grown so wide that I couldn't ignore it anymore. The loneliness, the distance, it all felt like a constant weight on my chest. I needed answers, even if I wasn't sure I was ready for them. One night, after he had fallen asleep, I made the decision. I knew it was a risk, but I had to know what was really going on. I had seen him acting distant, but this felt different. I needed to find out if there was something more to his behavior, something I wasn't seeing. So I took his phone. As I unlocked it and started scrolling, my heart raced. I knew this was wrong, but the need for the truth was overwhelming. I wasn't expecting much, but what I found shook me to my core. There, in his messages, I found a fake Instagram account. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just a casual account, it was a place where he had been secretly chatting with his ex. It wasn't a one-time conversation either. There were messages, recent messages, where they spoke about their lives. The connection between them was still there, and that hurt more than anything. I couldn't help but feel betrayed. The trust I had built with him over the past few months seemed to shatter in an instant. I had never imagined that this could happen, that the man I had married, the man who had promised to always be there for me, was stale, holding on to someone else from his past. What did this mean? Was I just someone to pass the time with while he still thought about her? Was I just a placeholder? I scrolled through the messages, trying to understand everything. I saw the way they talked, the ease, the familiarity, the shared history between them. It was clear that they were more than just friends, and yet he had denied it when I asked him about her before. He had promised that there was nothing more between them, that they had moved on and were just in touch out of mutual respect. But now, reading these messages, I knew that wasn't true. The conversations they were having were too intimate to be just friendly. He had lied to me, and that felt like a stab to the heart. The worst part was the deleted history. There were no old messages, no records of their past conversations. He had gone to great lengths to hide everything from me, to make sure I wouldn't find out about his continued connection with her. It made me feel like I was living in a lie, and it hurt in a way I couldn't explain. He had erased the past to keep his secrets, to protect himself from the consequences of his actions. I couldn't just let this go. I had to confront him, even if it meant tearing our relationship apart. I wasn't sure how he would react, but I knew I couldn't continue living in the dark. The trust I had in him was gone, and without that, I didn't know how we could move forward. The next morning, I didn't waste any time. As soon as he woke up, I asked him about the fake Instagram account. I told him I had seen the messages and confronted him about his ongoing communication with his ex. His reaction was immediate, defensive, almost like he was caught off guard. But the more I pushed, the more his story started to crumble. He told me that they were just friends, that after their breakup, they had decided to stay in touch through secret accounts. He explained that they had concerns about each other's well-being, and that was why they still kept in touch. It all sounded so rehearsed, like a story he had told himself over and over again to justify his actions. But I wasn't buying it anymore. He had promised me, after I had questioned him before, that he wouldn't have any contact with her. He had assured me that she was part of his past, that he was over her, and that I had nothing to worry about. Yet here I was, staring at the evidence of his lies. I had caught him in the act, and there was no denying it. He begged me to understand, to forgive him, and promised that it would never happen again. He deleted the fake account, said it was a mistake, and that he would do anything to make it right. But I couldn't help but feel like I was being manipulated. How many more secrets had he been keeping from me? How could I trust him again after this? For days, I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal. I tried to push it out of my mind, to focus on the positives of our relationship, but it was impossible. The trust had been broken, and I didn't know how to rebuild it. I wanted to believe his promises, but the doubt was always there, lingering in the back of my mind. Every time he touched his phone, every time he went quiet, I couldn't help but wonder if he was still hiding something from me. And the worst part was, I didn't know if I could ever feel the same way about him again. As if things weren't already difficult enough, life threw us another challenge. We had a 9-month-old son now, and the strain in our relationship was starting to affect everything. The demands of parenthood, the sleepless nights, the constant exhaustion, it was all taking its toll. But even through the exhaustion, the loneliness remained. I found myself feeling more and more isolated, even though I was surrounded by my family. I was a mother now, but I still needed love, affection, and emotional support from my partner. But I wasn't getting any of that. The distance between us felt wider than ever, and I was beginning to wonder if it was too late for us. The more I thought about everything, the more I realized that I was losing myself. The woman I used to be, the woman who was strong, confident, and hopeful, was slipping away. I was becoming someone else, someone who questioned everything, someone who felt small and insignificant in her own home. I hated the person I was becoming, and I didn't know how to stop it. But how could I stop it when the man I loved had betrayed me, when the trust between us was shattered? I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't know what the future held for us, or if we could ever find our way back to each other, but one thing was clear: I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I needed to face it, even if it meant losing everything. The question was, could I still love him after everything that had happened? Could I rebuild the trust that had been shattered, or was it too late for us? I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that had settled deep inside me. The promise he made to me, the reassurances that everything was fine, felt like empty words. I wanted so desperately to believe that he had changed, that he was being honest with me, but everything felt like a lie. The image of his fake Instagram account, the messages with his ex, it all replayed in my mind over and over again, each time a sharp reminder of how much I had been deceived. I wasn't sure how to move forward from this. It wasn't just the phone and the secret chats, it was the betrayal of trust, the emotional distance that had been building between us for months. What hurt the most was that he wasn't just lying about the account or his ex, he was lying about how he felt about me. I had been asking for affection, for attention, for connection. I had been craving his love and support, but it felt like I was invisible to him. I had tried so hard to make things work, to be understanding, to be the wife he needed, but it felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. It was always "you think too much" or "you're overreacting" when I tried to address our issues. It wasn't just the fake account that hurt me, it was the fact that he couldn't see my pain, couldn't see how desperately I was trying to hold on to something that seemed to be slipping away. The loneliness I felt had grown to a point where it was suffocating. When we had our son, I thought things might change, that the arrival of a new life would bring us closer. But instead, it only deepened the void between us. We had our baby, but he wasn't there for me the way I needed him to be. I felt like a mother, but I also felt like a stranger in my own home. The moments that should have been filled with love and joy felt hollow, as though the connection we once had was gone forever. I looked at him sometimes and wondered who he was. This man, the one I had married, was a stranger to me now. I had never imagined that he would be the kind of person who would hide things from me, who would continue a relationship with an ex behind my back. I didn't understand how he could do that to me, how he could promise me that I was enough, that I was all he needed, and then turn around and keep a secret from me. It wasn't just about the ex, it was about everything that had led up to this moment. It was about the distance, the emotional neglect, and the constant feeling of being dismissed. I tried to keep things together for the sake of our son, but it was hard. Every day felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing, afraid to bring up the past because I knew how he would react. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to acknowledge that there was something wrong with our marriage. I tried to be patient, tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it wasn't working. The more I tried to push for answers, the more he pushed me away. His health issues became the excuse for everything. He would say his rheumatoid arthritis was causing him pain, and that's why he wasn't as affectionate or present as he used to be. But I didn't understand how that could be the sole reason for everything that had changed. He had had Ra long before we met, so it couldn't possibly be the cause of the distance between us. It didn't help that our intimacy had all but disappeared. We had barely had any physical contact since our son was born. We had been intimate only 5 times in the past 9 months, and it wasn't because I didn't want to be close to him. I tried, I really did. But it was like he wasn't interested in me that way anymore. He had become so distant, both emotionally and physically, and it left me feeling unwanted and unimportant. I couldn't help but wonder if there was someone else, someone he was paying attention to instead of me. The thought of it made my stomach churn, and I hated myself for even considering it. But how else could I explain his behavior? How could I explain the lack of affection, the constant withdrawal? It felt like there was a wall between us, one that I couldn't break down no matter how hard I tried. I began to feel like I was living in a constant state of confusion. I loved him, but I didn't know if I could continue living like this. I didn't know if I could keep giving him my love when he wasn't reciprocating it. I didn't know if I could keep sacrificing my own emotional needs for the sake of someone who seemed so distant and detached. I felt like I was losing myself, like I was becoming someone else, someone who was always second-guessing, always wondering what was going on in his mind, always feeling like I wasn't enough. I hated the way I was starting to behave. I was no longer the woman I had once been, the woman who was confident, who trusted her instincts, who didn't let doubts rule her life. Now, I was someone who constantly felt insecure, someone who was always afraid of being betrayed, of being left behind. I tried to talk to him again. I asked him about everything, the lack of intimacy, the way he treated me, the fact that I felt like I was invisible to him. But again, he dismissed it. He blamed everything on his health, on his pain, on his exhaustion. He told me that I was imagining things, that I was just overthinking everything. He made me feel like I was the one who was wrong, the one who was making problems where there were none. And yet, deep down, I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut. I could feel it in the way he treated me, in the way he seemed to care less and less about my feelings. It wasn't just the ex, it was everything. It was the way he had changed, the way he didn't seem to care about me anymore. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he wasn't still involved with his ex, that he wasn't hiding something from me. But I couldn't ignore the facts. I couldn't ignore the evidence I had seen. And even if the fake Instagram account was deleted, the feeling of betrayal lingered. It wasn't just about one instance of dishonesty, it was about the pattern of behavior, the repeated dismissals of my feelings, the coldness that had taken over our relationship. I didn't know what to do anymore. I felt so torn between wanting to make it work and wanting to walk away. I loved him, but I didn't know if I could keep loving someone who wasn't there for me, someone who didn't seem to care about my emotional needs. I didn't know if I could keep pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But no matter what, I couldn't deny the pain I was feeling. I couldn't ignore the fact that I was being torn apart by this relationship, by this betrayal, and by the loneliness that seemed to consume me every day. I knew I needed to make a decision, but I didn't know what that decision would be. Should I stay and try to rebuild the trust that had been broken? Or should I leave and try to find happiness elsewhere? The fear of being alone was overwhelming, but so was the fear of staying in a relationship that no longer made me happy. I loved him, but I didn't know how much more I could take. I woke up every morning with the same heavy weight pressing down on me. The guilt of questioning my marriage, the feeling of betrayal, and the sense of being lost consumed me. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried to focus on the little moments of joy that came with having a son. He was my light, my reason for pushing through, yet even his innocence couldn't stop the storm that raged inside me. I couldn't understand what had happened to us. How had we gone from being two people in love, full of hope for the future, to this? Two strangers who barely spoke, who had lost any sense of connection. I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't continue living in this space where every day felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid of pushing him too far or asking too many questions. He had made it clear that I was thinking too much, that I was imagining problems where there were none, but I couldn't silence the voice inside my head. It was telling me that something wasn't right, that I wasn't overreacting, and that I wasn't asking too much. I had been patient for so long, but it was starting to feel like all my patience had been in vain. The worst part was that I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I loved him, and the thought of walking away from the life we had built together felt like the hardest decision I would ever make. I had promised to stand by him, to support him through sickness and health. I had made those vows with the belief that we would face everything together, that we would be a team. But now, the only thing I felt was isolation. I was standing alone, fighting battles that no one could see. He wasn't there for me emotionally, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep giving without receiving anything in return. His health had been a constant excuse. I tried to be understanding, I really did. His rheumatoid arthritis was painful, and I knew it affected his mood and his ability to engage with me. But it wasn't just the physical pain. There was something deeper, something emotional, something that wasn't being addressed. His distance, his lack of affection, the way he shut down when I tried to reach out, none of it made sense. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The fake Instagram account was just the tip of the iceberg, a small piece of a much larger puzzle that I couldn't put together on my own. I tried to find comfort in our son. When he would smile, when he would reach for me, my heart would swell with love. But even that wasn't enough to fill the emptiness that had taken root in my soul. I wanted so badly to believe that things could get better, that we could find our way back to the love we once shared. But with every day that passed, I began to wonder if that was even possible. The doubts were growing, and no matter how much I tried to ignore them, they lingered, clouding every interaction, every conversation. I asked myself time and time again if this was normal. Was this how things went after having a baby? Was this just a phase? A tough period that would pass once we adjusted to our new lives? I didn't know. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay. I couldn't keep ignoring the way he treated me, the way he dismissed my feelings. I had tried for so long to make things work, but now I was at a breaking point. The pain of constantly feeling neglected, the pain of being invisible in my own marriage, was starting to take its toll on me. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone full of doubt, full of insecurity, full of fear. The emotional toll was beginning to show in other ways too. I found myself crying more often, feeling more anxious, feeling like I was losing control of everything. It wasn't just the sadness that came with the lack of affection. It was the anger, the frustration, and the confusion. I didn't know how much longer I could live this way, feeling like I was constantly fighting for something that was slipping through my fingers. The more I tried to hold on, the more it felt like he was slipping further away. I had become someone I didn't want to be. I had started to fight with him over small things, things that didn't matter, just to get a reaction out of him. I didn't want to fight, but I couldn't help it. It was like a part of me was lashing out, trying to get through to him, trying to make him see how much I was hurting. But he would always shut me down, dismiss me, make me feel like I was the one who was overreacting. And then I would cry. I would cry because I didn't know what else to do. And he would say the same thing over and over again, "You always cry. I can't stand it." Those words cut me deeper than anything else. It wasn't just that he didn't understand my pain, it was that he couldn't tolerate it. He couldn't tolerate the rawness of my emotions, the vulnerability I was showing. And I hated myself for crying. I hated myself for feeling like I needed him to care, to comfort me, when it felt like he couldn't care less. I began to wonder if he had ever truly cared about me the way I had cared about him. Was it all just a lie? Was I just another part of his life that he had moved on from? His ex had clearly meant something to him, and I didn't know how to feel about that. I had never been jealous before, but now I couldn't stop thinking about her. Was she the one he still wanted? Was she the one he was still in love with? I had tried to talk to him about it, to ask him what was really going on, but every time I did, he would turn the conversation back on me. He would tell me that I was the problem, that I was too emotional, too sensitive. He would accuse me of being paranoid and make me feel like I was crazy for questioning him. And it made me question myself. Was I really being irrational? Or was there something deeper that I wasn't seeing? The more I tried to understand, the more lost I felt. I wasn't sure who he was anymore, and I wasn't sure who I was becoming. I had always prided myself on being strong, on trusting my instincts, on knowing what was right for me. But now I felt like I was drowning, like I was losing everything that had once made me confident and secure. I loved him. I truly did. But I wasn't sure if love was enough anymore. I wasn't sure if love could heal the wounds that had been inflicted by his lies and his neglect. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again, if I could ever feel the way I used to feel about him. I kept asking myself, what should I do? I didn't have the answer. I didn't know if staying was the right choice or if leaving was the only option. I didn't know if I could keep fighting for a marriage that seemed broken beyond repair, or if I should give up and find a way to move on. The pain of losing him felt unbearable, but the pain of staying in a relationship that was making me miserable was just as bad. I was torn in two, caught between the love I had for him and the need to protect myself from further heartache. And in the silence of my own thoughts, I realized that whatever I decided to do, it had to be for me. I had to start putting myself first. But even then, the fear of making the wrong choice lingered, and I didn't know how to silence it.